Welcome back, everybody. This is the second episode of the 2020 Fantasy Football Awards. First episode was quarterbacks. I recommend you check that out. Don't need to be right now, could be after this, but we're going to hop right in with the running backs. Real quick, if you enjoy fantasy football content, like stuff like this, player analyses, all that type of fun stuff, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Now, to hop in with my fantasy football running back MVP, I have James Robinson. If you watched the first video about quarterbacks, you would see that the trend of a waiver wire pickup being the MVP at a position is being continued. And to me, James Robinson had to be the choice. Sure, there were guys like Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, and Alvin Kamara who all did well, but they were also all first round picks. You kind of drafted them with that expectation, and even though they might have surpassed it, especially in the case of Derrick Henry. I'm focusing on the valuable part of MVP. James Robinson went undrafted in pretty much every single league. His ADP on Fantasy Pros isn't even listed because he was undrafted that much. He finished the year in half PPR formats as the RB7. In a year where running backs were dropping left and right, where you really couldn't find yourself more than 8 consistent options on any given week, I really don't think this could have been anyone else. When you have the ability to pick up a lock and load RB1 off of the waiver wire, you have to take that and you have to absolutely run with it. This actually happened more than once this year. If you managed to grab Antonio Gibson off your wire, he was RB12. So, depending on the size of your league, either the lowest of RB1s or the highest of RB2s. Robinson was a top 12 running back in 7 out of the 14 weeks he played. A nice bit of consistency in a year that was an absolute mess for running backs. And most of those other weeks, he was no worse than a mid RB2, which not only for a running back was fine this year for the most part, but for a guy you picked off the waivers, it's simply incredible. If you scooped this guy up, you had the ability to either compensate for early round struggles if you took C-Mac, Saquon Barkley, a guy like Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Austin Ekeler, or you had a complement to a guy like Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. Either way, you were either saving your own ass or building the strongest fantasy running back core you pretty much could have had this season. I'm excited to see all of these analysts trying to think of ways that James Robinson shouldn't be the starting running back next year, try to invent all these narratives and scenarios to bring down his value in drafts next year, where if you can get him in the late second, early third, if he's there, that's a value you're going to take and run. That is my fantasy football running back MVP, James Robinson. Moving on to most disappointing player, we have a very large tie between Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, Austin Ekeler, the second half of Ezekiel Elliott's season, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon, Chris Carson, and Josh Jacobs. These guys, for one reason or another, were disappointing or busted if you want to consider an injury a bust. Clyde did not play that well. He got Le'Veon Bell. Miles Sanders was hurt. Didn't play that well. Kenyon Drake was fine. Got hurt. Didn't play that well. Ekeler was hurt. Was fine when he played. Zeke without Dak and Dalton for those few games was just horrid. You really couldn't play him at all for a span. Saquon got hurt like week 1. CMC was out for pretty much the entire year. Joe Mixon was out for like over half of the season with this bizarre injury. Chris Carson didn't have a single 100-yard rushing yard game and was hurt. And Josh Jacobs was incredibly inconsistent. And the only reason he finished as high as he did was because of 3 really good games. Outside of that, he was terrible. These are all guys who were drafted in the top 30 as per Fantasy Pros ADP in half PPR formats. So these were guys that were likely getting taken in either the first 2.5 or 3 rounds of your draft. This was such a catastrophic year for running backs. I felt like I needed to include everybody, even when they went down to injury. That's how bad this year was. I spared a guy like Nick Chubb because I believe he still finished top 10 somehow. He's just that good. But I felt like just to really show how bad this year was, I needed to include that list. That is pretty much 1/3 of the first 3 rounds of your draft. And that's not to mention other guys who might have struggled in that realm but didn't meet this qualification exactly. It was a horrible year for running backs, especially if you drafted early. David Johnson was right outside that ADP as well. He was dog shit for most of the year. But there is a silver lining that comes with pretty much every top-end running back or mid running back 1, low-end RB1 struggling or getting hurt. I'll cover it more in the future, but long story short, this year's draft, the narrative you're going to be seeing pushed is go receiver early, go receiver heavy, grab that top end talent, fade running backs. We saw what happened last year. That's going to enable you to grab some of these guys like an Austin Ekeler, like a Miles Sanders, like Nick Chubb, even though he didn't qualify for the most disappointing player award. It's going to allow you to grab those guys in an extreme value, and you'll still be able to smash guys like Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, maybe Allen Robinson in the later rounds 4, 5, 6. The draft value that comes from this like 10-way tie for most disappointing player is going to be a very nice consolation prize for it likely tanking your season this year. Following that, the winner of the Championship Winner Award, it is nobody else but your Alvin Kamara. He had an absolute day on Christmas, Week 16. Y'all know what happened. Record-tying performance with 6 rushing touchdowns. If Sean Payton wasn't such a throbbing asshole and had this bizarre, almost worrying obsession with Taysom Hill, he would have had 7, would have had the record. I don't think anybody would have touched it for a very long time. With those 6 touchdowns, though, he had 55 points in half PPR, 57 in full PPR, but it was the best performance by an RB all year, and I think is either the first or second best performance on the year from a skill position at least. I think it's either him or Tyreek Hill, but I think he edged out Tyreek, and this came at the exact right time for fantasy owners. If you had him and you kept him through the struggle of Taysom Hill when he was getting 1 catch, 0 catches, 2 catches, you were rewarded handsomely in the most important week of the entire season. A 55 burger in your championship, or maybe it's the semis, or maybe the first round of your championship, depending on your league format. Either way, if you're going off a Week 16 title, like I am, Alvin Kamara likely won you the week. I know there are some other big performers that week, but if you had Alvin Kamara, I don't envision that you really lost unless you ran into an absolute buzzsaw. That's it. Alvin Kamara, championship winner with the half-a-century mark. Shifting from an award that reaches as the highest of highs, the fantasy championship, we're on to one on a bit more somber note, but one that gives us hope for next season. And that is the What Could Have Been award. I could have given this to any of the near dozen running backs I'd listed earlier. Christian McCaffrey was averaging 30 points per game in his 3-week sample size. Had he not been hurt the whole season, Saquon, we saw what Wayne Gallman was doing at points. I believe it was 5 straight weeks with a touchdown or at least double-digit points. Saquon's far more talented. He could have easily done that and more, but I'm going to settle on my guy, Austin Ekeler. It's a bit of a homer pick because I'm super high on Austin Ekeler. If you want to see why, check out my Austin Ekeler player profile. I go a bit deeper, give some analysis, give some stats, give some team information, video I really like. So to keep it a little bit shorter here, since I did dedicate about 12 minutes to it on my other video, Ekeler would have been an absolute machine with him and Herbert together. He would have averaged probably or gotten damn near 100 receptions and probably could have approached 1,800 yards from scrimmage. It's really sad to see that he was hurt for so long, and when he came back, he looked fine. Probably still a little banged up because apparently it was a weird tear of the muscle, but I have no issue with giving this to Austin Ekeler because I do think he is worthy of it, and I think what he will produce next year will really justify this award in about a year's time. Moving on to the 1 Week Wonder Award that actually took place in Week 1, we got Malcolm Brown. In Week 1, he delivered the RB4 performance on the week, which led to furious waiver wire pickups and claims and articles about how the Rams found their workhorse guy, how he was going to be the one moving forward. Cam Akers is out of the picture, believe he was hurt. Darrell Henderson didn't mean shit, and it all completely fell apart within a week. After dropping a clean 24.5 to start the year, he only had 2 other weeks over 10 total points, which were 11.7 and 18.1. He didn't surpass 20 again for the rest of the year. In the weeks immediately following that Week 1 performance, he had 4.7, 1.9, and 8.2. And by that point, everybody had dropped him. They'd realized that they had fallen for the classic blunder, the Week 1 breakout from an absolute bum. And I'm saying bum because he stinks. He's the 4th best running back on this roster, behind Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Sean Wofford. And the worst part about this, the thing that makes it sting a little extra, is that if you picked up Malcolm Brown Week 1, it is very likely that you also missed out on James Robinson. Because although he didn't have the crazy performance that Malcolm Brown did, he secured every single running back touch for his team that week, the only running back to do that at all in Week 1. So he was on the radar, he just didn't have as big of a performance, And if you got Malcolm Brown, you got caught up in the hype with him or a guy like Nyheim Hines, you likely missed out on James Robinson, which makes this all the worse and all the more painful if you're someone that got trapped by Malcolm Brown. Moving on to the final award, last but not least, this is the RB1 award that I should be giving to the overall RB1 of the season. But I'm going to make an exception because I made the rule that you only get nominated or you only get one award, and I make the rules. This is my video. So I'm going to give it to the RB2 and half PPR, Derrick Henry. Technically, it should be Alvin Kamara because he was RB1, but I could not deny him the championship winner trophy, so I made an exception and I gave it to Derrick Henry. So technically, Kamara should have 2 and Henry should have 0. Fuck you, sue me. Henry played every single game this year, something that RBs 1 and 3, Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook, both could not say. No, I know he was a bit up and down at points, but he really came through in what is officially known as like Derrick Henry season at this point. Weeks 10 through 16, where Derrick Henry just gained strength and all these other defenses were sick and tired of it. They're all banged up. They're all beaten up. And the last thing they want to tackle is this like 7'2", 300-pound absolute manimal running full steam with his fucking stiff arm ready to go and just murder somebody. So kind of a cheating selection by putting him here. But I can't deny the fact that Derrick Henry absolutely turned up and went stupid the last 5 to 6 weeks. If you played week 17, I believe he dropped around 35. So if you're one of those weirdos that was a championship that week, he probably won you that. Could have given him championship winner, but I operate on week 16 championships. That's my rule because that's what's supposed to happen. Long story short, Derrick Henry, the honorary RB1, but we all know it's Alvin Kamara technically. That's going to be it for tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed the second edition of the Fantasy Football Awards of 2020. Followed up with the running backs. I feel like this was a really hard list to go through just because of how tumultuous the season was for running backs. This was a year I personally, based on the content I consume and what I thought would be the best value, that I decided to hammer running back really hard in all of my drafts. The 2 main ones, I went triple RB to start. One, I went Cook, Mixon, Sanders. I traded Sanders for Ekeler immediately. Either way, I got screwed. Moved Cook for Zeke at some point. Got screwed. In my other league, I went Drake, I went Saquon, and I also went Miles Sanders. That turned out well. Moved Sanders for Clyde at some point in the season. I just got fucked. It was a rough year for me. I'm sure it was a rough year for a lot of people. And if you fucked those early running back picks, you likely lost unless you managed to pick up James Robinson, pick up Gibson, or absolutely kill your mid-round receiver picks, your quarterback, your tight end. Like if you had a draft of Diggs, Metcalf, Josh Allen, which is very possible, honestly, given how ADP shaped out this year, you could have overcome this, but for most of us, it didn't happen. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the running back awards. Wide receivers should be out relatively soon. All right, guys. Peace out.